Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something truly out of this world. Literally. We're taking a deep dive into a fascinating spiritual text that constructs this incredibly complex, multi-layered cosmic worldview, and it's all happening right here on Earth.
Okay, let's dive right into this premise. What if the soul of an extraterrestrial was living among us right now, just going about their day, experiencing human life? It's a massive hook, right? It totally challenges how we normally think about identity. And the text we're exploring today doesn't just treat this as a fun hypothetical. It operates on the framework that this is an active, everyday reality. So let's look at the source that lays out this whole cosmic dynamic.
The foundation for everything we're looking at today is a book called Conversations with Space People by Ryuho Okawa. Now, according to this text, the author actually conducts direct spiritual interviews. But he's not talking to little green men in spaceships. He's summoning alien souls that are currently residing inside human beings living on Earth today. It's a completely unique approach to extraterrestrial contact, spiritual channeling instead of physical landings. But to wrap our heads around how an alien soul can be inside a human, we really need to understand the specific rules of the spiritual universe laid out in this book.
So the absolute key here is this concept of the soul sibling. The text sets up a very specific cosmic architecture. Basically, a single human soul is actually just one part of a group of 6. Think of it like a team. You've got one core entity and 5 branches. The rule is that only one of these 6 takes on a physical body and lives on Earth, while the other 5 stay back in the spirit world to act as guardian spirits. But here's where it gets wild. What happens if one of those branches in the spirit world is actually an extraterrestrial?
Well, that brings us right to the first chapter of the book. The author identifies a specific human subject whose soul sibling is actually a Pleiadian, an extraterrestrial from the Pleiades star cluster. Through a spiritual summoning process, the author bypasses the human's normal everyday consciousness to speak directly to this Pleiadian guardian spirit. And what follows is this incredibly direct dialogue that maps out a sweeping, multiplanetary history.
Tracing her timeline, we find out this Pleiadian soul has definitely been around the block. According to the interview, her soul's journey actually started in the ancient past on Venus. From there, her people migrated to the Pleiades star cluster. Eventually, she made her way to Earth. And in a really fascinating twist, she reveals she had a past life on Earth, where she was born as a princess in the Arabian Peninsula, long before connecting to her present-day human subject in Japan. It's a massive chronological journey. But you have to wonder, what drives a soul to travel completely across the galaxy to come here?
The text makes her primary motivation crystal clear. During the interview, the Pleiadian soul expresses this incredibly deep, simple devotion. She literally just says, "El Cantare, I love him." Her journey across the stars wasn't about galactic conquest or some scientific mission. It was totally spiritual. She came to Earth specifically because she knew El Cantare, who is a supreme spiritual being in this belief system, was going to be born here, and she desperately wanted to experience his teachings directly.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep her historical connection to this figure really is. The text explains that way back when her people lived on Venus, this exact same supreme being taught them under a different name, El Mior. So her coming to Earth is described as almost a kind of cosmic homesickness. The Pleiadians deeply miss the teachings of love and harmony they originally received on Venus, and they are basically returning to the source of that teaching right here on our planet.
Which brings us to who the Pleiadian people actually are at their core. In the text, she outlines a very specific, deeply peaceful philosophy. Her civilization places its absolute highest values on love, harmony, and the pursuit of peaceful development. They're described as a highly peaceful species with a really strong, almost visceral dislike for any kind of conflict or fighting. They are basically the cosmic pacifists of this narrative. Now, looking at Earth through this hyper-peaceful Pleiadian lens gives us a really interesting perspective. During the dialogue, she notes that Earthlings have this really frustrating tendency to just get into fights and arguments over the absolute smallest things. To a being completely steeped in absolute harmony, the everyday friction and aggression of human life just seems chaotic and primitive. But human squabbles aren't even the main thing making her anxious on this planet.
The text actually introduces a much larger central tension, a hidden cosmic conflict happening right here on Earth. The Pleiadian reveals that our world is essentially a giant melting pot of different extraterrestrial souls, and let me tell you, they do not all share her peaceful philosophy. She's incredibly aware of the presence of other highly aggressive alien species sharing the planet with us, which creates a pretty volatile spiritual environment.
Chief among her concerns are the Reptilians. The text paints these beings in stark contrast to the Pleiadians.
Reptilians are described as reptile-like aliens who are intensely competitive, driven by a strict, almost ruthless mindset of survival and evolution. The text neutrally points out their carnivorous history, even mentioning that their original forms consumed Earth's mammals. They are positioned as the absolute apex predators of this cosmic ecosystem.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how perfectly it frames the central ideological battle happening quietly on Earth. It's not a sci-fi war with laser beams. It's a war of cosmic philosophies. On one side, we have the Pleiadians, championing love, harmony, and peaceful development. On the other side, the Reptilians, whose entire philosophy revolves around fierce competition and strict evolution. In fact, the text later notes that Reptilians don't even have a concept of heaven or hell. They literally only understand evolutionary progress and survival of the fittest. So you have these two profoundly opposing worldviews, both actively trying to influence the development of humanity.
As you can imagine, living in the middle of this ideological clash really takes its toll. In a surprisingly relatable moment of character depth, the Pleiadian soul confesses to the author, "I'm a little tired. I want to take a break in the Pleiades." It's this brief flash of vulnerability that shows just how heavy the burden of her presence here really is. Being constantly surrounded by human bickering and the looming, frightening presence of the Reptilians makes her mission on Earth spiritually exhausting for a being of pure harmony.
But despite that weariness and her genuine fear of these aggressive neighbors, she outlines a very clear, resolute mission. First, she is here to help spread the teachings of Cantare to humanity. Second, and this is probably the most ambitious part, she actually intends to use that philosophy of love to bring harmony to those aggressive aliens like the Reptilians. And third, through all of this, she aims to guide Earth as a whole toward a path of peaceful development, essentially taming those chaotic evolutionary forces with spiritual harmony.
Which leaves us with this really profound question based on the framework of this text. If our world is actually a hidden melting pot of diverse cosmic souls, representing entirely different stages and philosophies of existence, will a philosophy of love and harmony ultimately be enough to tame the raw, primal forces of evolution and aggression? It's a totally fascinating lens to view human conflict and spiritual growth through, and it leaves you wondering exactly which cosmic ideology is winning out in our own daily lives. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.
All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an extraordinary account from our source material, the absolutely wild, fascinating, and frankly mind-bending lore of an extraterrestrial visitor known as an Umite. We are going to break down the incredible narrative of an alien scout who is supposedly living right under our noses. Seriously, imagine for a second, what if someone living right next door to you was actually an alien gathering intelligence on humanity? I mean, it sounds exactly like a sci-fi movie pitch, right? But our source material presents this not as some hypothetical scenario, but as a reality happening on Earth right now. So how does that even work? Well, according to the text, this Umite exists on Earth as what's called a walk-in. Essentially, they're peacefully cohabiting within a human host. It's literally like having a roommate, but, sharing a body and consciousness. And unlike some dark, malicious possession, this is explicitly framed as a mutual, peaceful arrangement just to learn about earthly life.
The text details that this particular Umite scout purposely chose a host connected to a globally influential religious movement. Why? Basically, it's the ultimate front row seat. It allows them to efficiently gather data and experience human culture, thought, and spiritual development firsthand. And the source material actually documents a supposed direct interview with this exact entity.
Now, this intelligence gathering mission isn't just a casual sightseeing tour. It's driven by a desperate ticking clock. That brings us to Section 1, Fleeing a Dying Planet, the Umite Mission.
The text lays out a really stark contrast between our two worlds. Picture this. The Umite homeworld is currently suffering from severe desertification. Their temperatures are plummeting because of blocked solar rays, and they are facing a critical, planet-wide food crisis. Then they look at Earth. To them, our planet is this lush, abundant world with vast agricultural potential, especially if we were to combine it with their advanced technology.
And the whole reason they're here hinges on one absolutely terrifying number, 100. The Umites estimate their home planet has a maximum of 100 years left before complete extinction. So they aren't just explorers, they are interstellar refugees racing against a definitive planetary deadline. To survive, they're studying us to see if a peaceful migration is actually possible. And here's the crucial part.
They aren't looking to conquer us. Their ultimate goal is to share their advanced scientific techniques to significantly boost Earth's food supply. They want to regenerate our planet's resources so that both of our species can thrive together. It's pitched as a massive win-win.
But that begs the question, what exactly would we be welcoming to our planet? Section 2. The true Umite form, behind the illusion. Currently, the source claims they use advanced hypnosis and illusions to appear completely human. If you were standing in line for coffee next to one, your brain would be tricked into seeing just a regular person. They walk among us, completely undetected, specifically to avoid causing mass panic.
Because let me tell you, if they dropped that illusion, the physical reality would be a total shock. The source describes them as approximately 3 meters tall. That's nearly 10 feet. They have 8 functioning limbs, stick to a strictly vegetarian diet, and, get this, they bear a striking resemblance to giant earth bees. Just imagine a massive, highly intelligent, 10-foot-tall, 8-legged bee casually walking down the street.
They totally know how we'd react too. Anticipating our sheer terror at giant insectoid beings, the Umamite actually apologizes during the interview. They literally say, "We are very peaceful and believe in love, but our appearance does not suit your tastes. Please forgive that." I mean, it's a wonderfully bizarre moment of self-awareness. They know their true form would probably terrify us, despite their peaceful intentions.
And this profound self-awareness really comes from how deeply vulnerable they are. Which leads to Section 3, fear of the Reptilians, a vulnerable species.
The source material paints a really intense picture of competing alien factions operating on Earth right now. Despite looking like giant bugs, the Umites describe themselves as incredibly timid, almost cowardly. They are highly peaceful and avoid conflict at absolutely all costs. And they do this because they are terrified of other species sharing our planet, like the Reptilians, whom they view as incredibly aggressive evolutionary competitors.
And they have good reason to be scared. They represent the smallest alien faction on Earth, keeping maybe 10 to 100 individuals here at any given time. Plus, their technology is only about a century ahead of humanity's. In cosmic terms, that means we are practically neck and neck. They manage to travel using dimensional fluctuations between 3D and 4D space. But because their tech is so limited, this tiny scout team lives in constant hiding, ready to pack up and flee home the second they're discovered.
But despite that intense fear, they hold on to a really profound spiritual vision for the future. Section 4. A message of cosmic harmony. A spiritual vision.
This is where the lore gets incredibly deep. The Umites claim their culture balances advanced science, specifically focused on regenerating planets, with a literal religion of love. It's a martyr-based faith that heavily resembles the teachings of Jesus Christ. But even more fascinating, they want to achieve a spiritual synthesis. They actually hope to integrate their love-based faith with the Enlightenment philosophies of Buddha that they've studied here on Earth.
But here's the catch for us. For this massive migration and collaboration to ever work, humanity has to overcome our own internal stuff first. We have to wipe out our racial and national discrimination and establish a genuinely diverse value system across the globe. We have to mentally prepare to extend friendship to bizarre alien life forms without an ounce of prejudice. Because let's be real, if we can't even accept each other, how are we ever going to accept 8-legged, 10-foot-tall interstellar refugees?
And that leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought from the text to wrap up our explainer today. Is Earth truly ready to put aside its differences and evolve into a multi-species sanctuary? It's a huge shift in perspective, challenging us to look way past our earthly borders and really consider our place in a much wider, much stranger cosmic community. What do you think? Are we ready?
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a highly unusual, honestly, an absolutely fascinating esoteric text. We're looking at an alleged, deeply documented conversation with an extraterrestrial entity. Now, whether you look at this as sci-fi, spiritual channeling, or maybe some undiscovered cosmic truth, the sheer structure and the unapologetic philosophy in this source material are just, well, they're captivating. We're going to break down exactly what this entity claims about human history, and spoiler alert, it completely flips everything we usually get from pop culture. So, take a breath and let's dive into this.
Right out of the gate, this source material does not hold back. The entity claims direct, completely unsentimental responsibility for humanity's surviving at all. According to the text, if it weren't for their calculated intervention, early, weak humans, just walking around on 2 legs, would have basically been an all-you-can-eat buffet for dinosaurs. They say they stepped in, gave us the physical strength and the first weapons we needed to survive an incredibly hostile world. It's a breathtakingly bold claim, right? It frames all of human history not as this natural, organic progression, but as a heavily managed, deliberate project. Which brings us to the core question of today's explainer. Who is really driving human evolution? This text forces us to look at a pretty profound, almost unsettling idea. According to the dialogue we're looking at, is human progress truly our own hard-won achievement? Or is it the result of this unseen, forceful cosmic intervention? Let's meet the architect behind these staggering claims.
Section 1. Meet the Zeta Reptilian from the Magellanic Clouds. Let's unpack exactly who or what is speaking in this chapter.
So, they identify as a female reptilian from the Zeta Star in the Magellanic Clouds. But listen, you've got to forget everything Hollywood has taught you about humanoid green lizards. This entity describes its true form as resembling a massive pterosaur, specifically a pteranodon. Yeah, like the dinosaur. They openly admit that, to a primitive human, they'd look like this terrifying bird of prey or a massive winged reptile straight out of the Jurassic period. But the text insists this is their true, unfiltered biological form.
Now you might be wondering, how on earth do they interact with us without causing mass panic? Because, let's be real, a giant, highly intelligent pterodon strolling down the street would trigger pure chaos. Well, the text claims these beings operate almost like transformers. They have this highly advanced shape-shifting capability. They can alter their appearance so that to a human observer, they look totally normal or just go completely unnoticed. They purposely hide that prehistoric-looking form because they know the sheer terror it would instantly spark in the humans they're trying to influence.
Section 2. The Core Philosophy. Fierce Competition. What drives a being of this immense, ancient nature to bother with Earth at all?
The source lays out a very specific, fiercely unapologetic cosmic ethos. Identifying themselves as the gods of evolution, they firmly believe that true progress absolutely requires fierce, relentless competition. From their perspective, purely peaceful eras, which, sound pretty idyllic to us, are actually dangerous periods of stagnation. They argue that conflict, rapid technological advancement, and intense rivalry are the non-negotiable engines that drive a civilization forward and ensure it actually survives. They literally view themselves as the necessary catalysts for those clashes.
The text explicitly contrasts their aggressive, surgical approach to building a civilization against traditional Earth teachings, things like love, harmony, and forgiveness. The reptilian argues that, hey, love and harmony are great in theory, but they are dangerously insufficient on their own for surviving in a harsh universe. If left entirely to peaceful harmony, they claim Earth's evolution would have completely flatlined. They actually describe their competitive interventions as a necessary surgical operation, basically cutting away weakness to forcefully upgrade humanity.
Section 3. The Truth About Greys. A Cosmic Revelation. This highly clinical philosophy ties right into something we all recognize.
We're talking about the Greys. Big heads, large black eyes, slender bodies. You know the ones. If these massive pterodon-like reptilians are the true masterminds pulling the strings, where exactly do the gray aliens fit in? Are they partners, rivals?
Get ready for a major twist, because the text reveals the Greys aren't an independent alien species at all. The entity explicitly states that they are cyborgs. They're manufactured biological exploration machines created by the Reptilians. The text even points out that Greys are physically super frail. The entity actually jokes that a human could easily take one out with a baseball bat. So, rather than being cosmic overlords, the Greys are just unfeeling probes. They function as the remote eyes for the Reptilians, gathering precise data on Earth safely from a distance. Section 4. Shaping Earth's Empires, a track record of intervention. According to the dialogue, these entities haven't just been passively watching us. They claim to have actively, surgically shaped our major historical eras. Let's look at this staggering timeline. Beyond saving early humans from dinosaurs, they claim to be the driving force behind the last few hundred years of Earth's rapid technological explosion. They specifically tie their philosophy of competition to the rise of the Anglo-Saxon British Empire. After that, they say they heavily influenced the American Protestant work ethic to build U.S. global hegemony. And in the late 20th century, they assert they intervened in China during Deng Xiaoping's era, pushing the country out of a 2,000-year stagnation into rapid modernization. It's wild to think about.
viewing our own recent history not as human triumphs, but as managed phases of an alien project.
But interestingly, the text does note some exceptions to their influence. For instance, it claims former US President Barack Obama was not influenced by reptilians. Instead, the text reports his roots trace back to the Dogon, a distinct alien faction descending from a sister star to Sirius. The text paints a vivid picture of this Dogon lineage, describing them as resembling blue foxes with tails. They're known for being incredibly cunning, highly intellectual, and heavily focused on peace and survival, totally contrasting with the reptilians' fierce combativeness.
Section 5. A controversial cosmic goal. So what's the ultimate endgame here?
Why treat Earth like a giant laboratory for technological rivalry, while the entity asserts their civilization is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours? But it's not just about better microchips or faster spaceships. They claim to possess technology that perfectly unifies with a near eighth-dimensional spiritual enlightenment. From their highly elevated viewpoint, they've merged profound spiritual wisdom with high-tech space travel. When they look at Earth, they see a glaring, dangerous imbalance. We're developing the tech, but we completely lack the unified spiritual discipline needed to actually wield it safely.
To highlight how these teachings can go sideways, the text actually brings up the concept of hell. They claim the figure of Lucifer originally learned their valid philosophy of competition. But Lucifer tragically misinterpreted the core lesson. See, while the reptilians use competition strictly for the mutual evolution and prosperity of a whole civilization, Lucifer twisted it into a vain desire for self-centered domination. That eternal dictatorship is what created hell. The reptilians fiercely maintain their brand of competition is meant to elevate the entire species, absolutely never to enslave it. So, from their advanced perspective, Earth's current state is terribly, almost hopelessly backward. The entity actually calls our mainstream philosophies cannibalistic ideas, systems that just consume themselves without producing any real cosmic progress. Because we are, in their eyes, so far behind, they feel totally justified in their unsentimental, forceful push to elevate us. To them, we're basically primitives who desperately need a harsh, guiding hand to ever reach that eighth-dimensional enlightenment.
Which leaves us with a really profound, lingering question to ponder. If we look at the rapid, unnatural explosion of technology, empire, and global conflict over the last few centuries purely through the lens of this esoteric text, are our greatest leaps forward truly our own triumphs of the human spirit? Or are they the calculated results of a cosmic, surgical operation by ancient beings running a grand, competitive experiment? It's a staggering concept to wrap your head around for sure. Thank you for joining me on The Explainer as we unpack this genuinely incredible source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're putting on our cosmic anthropologist hats. We're taking a highly structured, strictly objective, and honestly, absolutely fascinating deep dive into a really specific piece of extraterrestrial lore. Now, whether you're a seasoned researcher of cosmic mythologies or you're just entirely new to these concepts, my goal today is to map out this complex narrative for you. We're going to unpack the biological, the political, and the spiritual profile of an alien race known as the Vegans, exactly as they're described in our source text. To do this, we're pulling all of our information today straight from this incredibly dense text, Dialogues with Extraterrestrials. Specifically, we're zooming right in on Chapter 4. This chapter documents a detailed, recorded conversation with an entity claiming to be a vegan from the Lyra constellation. Now, as an explainer, we aren't here to debate the reality of this encounter. Instead, we're neutrally analyzing the world building, the philosophies, and the cosmic rules presented in this chapter. It's a really intricate piece of literature, and breaking it down piece by piece is absolutely the best way to grasp it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our four-part framework for today. First, the vegan cosmic origins. Second, the chameleon effect. Third, galactic law and ethics. And finally, the primordial spiritual quest. Section 1, the vegan cosmic origins.
So, before we can even begin to understand how they operate, we kind of need to know where they came from, right? According to the text, the entities we call vegans actually share common ancestry with the Pleiadians. Originally, both groups were Venusians. Millennia ago, there was this highly advanced civilization thriving on Venus, but volcanic cataclysms basically made survival impossible. This forced a massive diaspora. The ancestors of the Vegans migrated out into the cosmos, eventually settling in the Lyra constellation, right near the star of Vega. But here's the wild part. Their journey didn't end there. The text states that in the present day, many vegans have actually traveled to Earth.
But they aren't arriving in, flying saucers. They are actively reincarnating into human bodies right now, secretly living among us. And why? To prepare for a coming spiritual awakening guided by an entity named El Cantare.
Moving on to Section 2, the chameleon effect.
Now, you might be wondering, if you were to meet a vegan in their natural environment, what would they actually look like? Well, to understand their biology, the text points us to an ancient Eastern philosophical concept called Ichinen Sanzen. It roughly translates to 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Now, in Earth philosophy, this just means our inner mental state instantly colors our reality. But for the vegans, this isn't a metaphor. It is literal biological science. On their homeworld, their physical bodies undergo instantaneous transformation based entirely on their inner thoughts. If a vegan feels fiercely protective, boom, they might instantly transform to look like a lion. If they feel defensive, they might suddenly sprout spikes like a hedgehog. They are literal shapeshifters. But, and this is key, the shifting is completely involuntary. It's directly tied to their immediate emotional and spiritual state.
And this brings us to a huge so what moment, because it highlights the massive psychological gap between their species and ours. Since a vegan's form is constantly shifting to reflect their inner mind, they live in a state of absolute physical honesty. They literally cannot hide their true intentions or feelings from one another. Their bodies give them away instantly. The vegan speaking in the text actually points out how bizarre human beings are in comparison. We humans have fixed forms, right? We all wear the same biological uniform every single day, and that allows us to hide our true thoughts, tell lies, and conceal our inner darkness behind a pleasant smile. To a vegan, our ability to harbor secret malice while looking completely normal is an entirely alien and, frankly, deeply alarming concept.
All right, Section 3, Galactic Law and Ethics.
Understanding their deep commitment to honesty really builds a larger picture of galactic relations. The text explicitly contrasts the vegan philosophy with another well-known extraterrestrial group you've probably heard of, the Reptilians. The Reptilians, according to this source, are driven by an ideology of evolution and competition. They believe in survival of the fittest, basically driving progress through conflict and dominance. But the vegans, they stand in stark contrast. Their core philosophy is based on change and diversity. Because their own bodies constantly change, they value adaptability, multi-presence, and the peaceful coexistence of vastly different forms of life. They view the highly competitive, dominant nature of the reptilian ideology as a lower, much more primitive way of thinking.
This belief in peaceful coexistence heavily informs their view on how aliens should interact with humans. The vegan in the text outlines what essentially reads like a cosmic legal document. They sharply criticize other extraterrestrial factions for what they deem illegal interventions here on Earth. They specifically call out forced nocturnal abductions, beaming sleeping humans out of their beds into ships. They completely condemn the implanting of tracking microchips, literally comparing it to how humans tag wild migratory birds. And they are absolutely disgusted by genetic experiments that aim to create human-alien hybrids.
So the bottom line is that the vegans view these actions as severe violations of cosmic law. They explicitly state that human beings are sovereign souls. We shouldn't be treated as mere test tube animals or biological playthings for more technologically advanced species. They believe in observing, maybe subtly guiding human civilization by reincarnating here, but they view direct, forceful tampering as highly unethical and just flat-out illegal.
Finally, Section 4, the primordial spiritual quest.
So this begs the question, if they're so technologically advanced, so ethically evolved, and they possess this incredible shape-shifting biology, why on earth are they giving all of that up to reincarnate into fixed, clunky human bodies on a messy planet like ours? Well, according to the text, they're here as students. Despite their vast knowledge of space travel, multidimensional existence, and all that philosophy of transformation, they recognize a gap in their own understanding. They've come to Earth specifically to study under that grand spiritual entity we mentioned earlier, El Cantare. They are searching for what they call the primordial law.
The vegan explains that while their race has totally mastered the laws of transformation, changing one existing thing into another, like shifting their physical forms, they haven't yet mastered the ultimate spiritual science. As the text highlights, they want to learn the alpha law. That is, the ability to create something completely out of nothing, to generate matter, life, and spirit from absolute zero. This is a level of divine creation they just haven't achieved yet, and they genuinely believe this profound lesson is currently being taught right here on Earth.
It really is a beautifully poetic reason for traversing the stars, isn't it? But before we wrap up this explainer, I want to bring this esoteric cosmic lore directly back to you. Think about that vegan biology we discussed.
If your deepest, most secret thoughts instantly became your physical appearance for everyone around you to see, if you literally couldn't hide behind your fixed human form, how would your world, your relationships, your everyday interactions change today? It's a pretty fascinating thought experiment hidden right inside this cosmic mythology. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me as a cosmic anthropologist today. I really hope this structured breakdown helped illuminate the text for you. Keep asking questions, keep looking at things from new perspectives, and I will see you in the next explainer.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into one of the most wild and complex extraterrestrial dossiers out there in modern esoteric literature. Whether you're a longtime follower of this kind of lore or you're just endlessly curious about how these cosmic mythologies are built, you're in the right place. We are unpacking the incredibly fascinating profile of a group known as the Vegans. Now, just to set the stage, absolutely everything we're exploring today comes straight out of Chapter 4 of a very specific spiritual and ufology text, Conversations with Space People. What's really unique about this book is that it treats extraterrestrial encounters as profound spiritual dialogues, rather than just physical nuts and bolts sightings. And today we're focusing entirely on a detailed conversation with a being from the Lyra constellation. So here is our agenda for The Explainer. We're going to cover 1. The origins of the Vegans, 2. The power of thought, 3. Their absolute condemnation of alien interventions, and 4. Their ultimate mission. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the origins of the Vegans. What's super interesting here is that this text doesn't just treat these beings as typical space travelers. They are actually framed as spiritual migrants. According to the lore, the Vegans didn't even start out in the Lyra constellation. They originally hailed from Venus, but when survival became impossible there, they migrated to the Vega star system. Fast forward a bit, and they eventually make their way to Earth, undergoing human reincarnations, which the text actually refers to as human training. They've done this several times, most notably in Japan. So why go through all of that? Well, the source claims these earthly incarnations are absolutely not random. They are explicitly here to prep for an approaching time when a high-level spiritual figure, known in the text as El Cantare, will actively guide humanity. Basically, they position themselves here on Earth to be ready for this exact event. Moving right along to Section 2, the power of thought. Okay, this is where the lore gets incredibly cool. The book uses this philosophical term to describe how the Vegans operate, called Ichinin Sanzen. It roughly translates to the idea that 3,000 realms exist in a single moment of life. But here's the kicker. For the Vegans, this isn't just philosophy, it's literal physics. Their inner thoughts instantaneously manifest in their physical appearance. They're the ultimate chameleons, driven purely by their own consciousness. Think about it like this. We humans are pretty fixed, right? Our bodies are dense and, relatively static. The text explicitly contrasts that with the Vegans, describing their true form as being half spirit and half physical. Their physical bodies have essentially become so spiritualized that they have an extreme level of fluidity. To put this into perspective, it is wild. The source lists some astonishing examples of what they can become. If they think of an animal, boom, they become it. Dinosaurs? Sure. Astronauts in spacesuits, angels, even demons. They can actually achieve simultaneous multi-location existences, which the text compares to those multi-armed deities you see in ancient traditions. For the Vegans, their entire existence is centered on change and diversity. It's not about linear evolution for them. It's about instant, thought-based transformation. Okay, on to Section 3, condemning alien interventions. So despite all this mind-bending power, the Vegans actually have a massive ethical problem with certain other alien groups. The text provides this really visceral quote, stating that rogue aliens are, quote, treating humans as experimental animals. It paints a picture of this giant cosmic ethical divide where the Vegans are acting almost like intergalactic whistleblowers. And the lore gets really specific about what the Vegans consider highly illegal. Honestly, it reads like a greatest hits of sci-fi tropes. We're talking about forced sleep abductions, using tractor beams that pull you right out of bed, embedding tracking chips like humans are migrating birds, genetic manipulation to create hybrids, and wiping people's memories so victims just think they have a sleep disorder. The text basically equates these rogue extraterrestrials to smugglers or human traffickers operating in the shadows. Because of that, the Vegans themselves maintain a strict adherence to non-intervention. Even with tech and spiritual abilities that are light years beyond ours, Their ethical code completely forbids them from directly manipulating Earth's civilization. The text is super clear about this. You do not interfere with a living human society unless you have explicit, high-level spiritual permission to do so. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, the ultimate mission. So here's the million-dollar question. If they aren't here to abduct people or manipulate our society, why bother coming to Earth? If your biology allows you to literally shapeshift based on thought alone, what could you possibly need from a comparatively primitive planet like ours? Well, the text gives a really profound answer. For all their infinite shapeshifting, the vegans admit they actually lack one fundamental capability. They don't know the primordial law of creating something from nothing. They can manipulate, they can transform existing matter in infinite ways, but they literally cannot perform true 0-to-1 creation. And that brings us to the whole point of their dossier. According to the lore, learning this ultimate primordial law, which they call Alpha's Law, is the absolute sole reason for their mission on Earth. They came here specifically to learn this root law of creation directly from the teachings of Cantare. So even with all their unimaginable advancements, they're basically here as students trying to learn the universe's deepest spiritual mechanics. So let's leave off with a thought to chew on. It's an amazing intersection of sci-fi tech and esoteric spiritual evolution. It challenges us to ask, if a civilization truly masters the physical realm to the point where a thought instantly becomes reality, does the final frontier completely cease to be technological? Does it just become purely about the spiritual genesis of creation itself? It's a massive concept to wrap your head around, and it's brilliantly laid out in this text. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible frameworks of our universe.
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are looking at some source material that is, well, it's completely fascinating. It really blends high-stakes science fiction with some very urgent spiritual warnings. The text claims to document a literal, actual conversation with an extraterrestrial being. We're going to break down the origins, the warnings, and the ultimate plea of a purported visitor from the stars. It's quite the ride, so let's get right into it.
We're going to start our journey with a really striking question. Why is an alien from Alpha Centauri weeping for Earth? Now, what makes this source text so unusual isn't just the massive cosmic claims it makes, although there are plenty of those. It's the profound emotional weight it carries. You see, throughout the transcript of this interview, the text includes these specific stage directions, noting that this extraterrestrial visitor is actively, continuously sobbing while delivering her message. It immediately tells us that we aren't just looking at some dry list of intergalactic facts. No, we are looking at an urgent, desperate plea from someone who seems deeply, deeply traumatized.
Okay, let's dive into this. We are unpacking Chapter 6 from the book Interviews with Space People. Now, this text is structured as a series of direct dialogues, and the chapter we're focusing on today purportedly details a conversation with an entity from the Alpha Centauri star system. In this explainer, our goal is to impartially map out exactly what this being claims happened to her home planet, why she came to Earth in the first place, and what she absolutely insists is about to happen to us.
What's really fascinating about the original text's formatting is how it captures this profound despair. When the interviewer begins asking the Alpha Centaurian about her origins and her mission, the text utilizes these parentheticals to explicitly indicate that she is weeping. For example, when asked, "Did you have a great mission when you came to Earth?" she simply answers, "Yes," while crying. It grounds these massive, almost unbelievable claims in a deeply emotional narrative. She isn't presenting herself as just a passive observer to human history. She presents herself as a survivor of an unimaginable world-ending catastrophe.
The text goes on to outline a tragic timeline of her backstory, and it's pretty intense. According to the source, she was once a female religious leader in a highly flourishing civilization over on Alpha Centauri. But then came the fall. The source explains that her society entirely lost its spiritual faith, which led to a catastrophic vulnerability. Because of this total loss of belief, they were attacked and ultimately defeated by demonic forces. This resulted in the complete destruction of their civilization. The survivors had to escape, forming a fleet of massive mothership-style UFOs. This fleet journeyed through space to Earth, eventually arriving during the ancient era of the Mu continent.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core warning of the chapter. The text draws a very specific and frankly very dangerous parallel between the fall of Alpha Centauri and Earth's current trajectory. It claims Alpha Centauri's fatal mistake was a complete loss of faith, treating science as completely omnipotent, like science was the only thing that mattered. And the alien warns that modern Earth is echoing those exact same mistakes right now.
She asserts that an over-reliance on science, completely devoid of any spiritual grounding, creates a massive blind spot, a blind spot that hostile forces can and will exploit.
Which brings us to the immediate existential threat facing humanity. The Alpha Centaurian explicitly warns that because Earth is repeating these historical mistakes, we are standing on the precipice of a major crisis. We're in imminent danger of being overrun by the exact same type of demonic forces that destroyed our home planet. If these forces of evil win, she warns, the planet will be transformed into a literal hell realm, not metaphorically, but a literal hell on Earth.
So the crucial point is how this visitor proposes we stop this impending doom. The text presents a very specific religious solution to this cosmic problem. The alien states her core motivation for coming to Earth, weeping, as she says, because El Cantare has descended to this Earth, I came to help him. She reveals a desperate, singular desire to assist this spiritual figure known as El Cantare. She views his teachings as the absolute last chance to save humanity from the terrible fate her own people suffered.
To avoid this planetary destruction, the alien lays out specific, urgent steps that humanity must take right now. According to the text, we must first awaken spiritually, breaking free from the illusion that materialistic science is the only reality out there. Second, there must be a firm, unyielding belief in El Cantare. Third, humanity must conduct rigorous missionary work to spread this spiritual truth far and wide. And finally, by doing all of this, the goal is to expand the Buddha land and actively dispel the evil thoughts that attract these demonic forces in the first place. The text frames this not as some philosophical metaphor, but as a literal, ongoing battle for Earth's survival.
The message culminates in a stark ultimatum. The alien explicitly warns that this missionary work isn't just an optional good deed, it's absolutely crucial. If people do not actively step up to spread these spiritual teachings, the demonic forces will inevitably multiply, they'll grow stronger, and they will win. It's a heavy, sobering plea from a being who, according to the narrative of the text, has already watched an entire world burn because they didn't heed this exact same warning.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with the core philosophical question at the heart of this remarkable text. Regardless of how you view the extraterrestrial elements of this source material, the central warning itself is pretty profound. Are we striking the right balance between omnipotent science and spiritual faith? Are we so incredibly confident in our technological progress that we are completely ignoring the health of our human spirit? It's a compelling, thought-provoking question to ask ourselves as we look toward our own future. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.